As I walk these hallowed grounds, I am struck with a profound sense of pride and awe. Looking out over the battlefield that once saw over 14,000 patriots selflessly fighting for our freedom, I cannot help but think there is no nobler cause than freedom and democracy. Although the Battle of Monmouth is considered by many historians to be an insignificant battle with no real strategic value, I beg to differ. On June 28, 1778, on a stifling hot day, 370 men had lost their lives for this fledgling democracy. No one will ever convince me that this battle was insignificant. I am neither a military nor historical scholar, but I know some very important things that are overlooked in historical accounts: bravery, honor, and courage to fight for a righteous cause. That, my friends, is the cornerstone of American democracy. It will always be worth fighting for, no matter how insignificant some people view it. Let's take a walk through history. The Battle of Monmouth began in the early morning on a blistering hot day on June 28, 1778. At approximately 8 a.m., the first shots of the Battle of Monmouth rang out. Washington and his troops had been shadowing and harassing the British troops as they continued their withdrawal towards Sandy Hook from Philadelphia. Washington, still angry and humiliated by his defeats at Germantown and Brandywine, wanted desperately to provide a punishing blow to the British troops as they retreated. Although many of his officers warned that such an attack was ill-advised and bordered on negligence, Washington paid no heed and went ahead with his plan. That being an overwhelming strike at the British rear guard as they withdrew. Washington felt that this decisive blow would certainly change the balance of the war and his favorability with Congress. Washington had heard rumors of Congress's disapproval of how the war was going and discussed replacing him as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Would his gamble pay off? In spite of the naysayers, Washington ordered Major General Charles Lee forward, ahead of the main battle units, to lead a surprise attack on Sir Henry Clinton's rear guard. But in a gross oversight, Lee failed to communicate and organize with the other commanders. What followed was disastrous. Lee's objective was to flank the British rear guard and attack from 3 different positions. Then he would be supported by Washington's main battle group, which was still 2 miles away. Lee ordered a regiment of approximately 700 men under the command of Colonel William Grayson, stationed on the left side of the battlefield, to attack the rear guard of Clinton's retreating army. After the disastrous attack, seeing that the amount of British troops in the rear guard was grossly underestimated and their position was unattainable, Grayson called off his attack and began retreating back into the woodlands. Other regiments saw this retreat and assumed it was a general order from Lee and began withdrawing their troops as well. Watching this entire scene unfold, Lee was mortified. Considering the size of the British rear guard, Lee thought it best to retreat as well. When Washington heard the news of Lee's retreat, he galloped ahead of the main battle group. When he got to the battleground, he was infuriated to see the remainder of Lee's troops leaving the battle area through the morass. In less than hospitable terms, Washington gave Lee the option of staying with these troops or going back to lead the rest of the army to the battlefield. Lee chose the former. Washington rode back to the remaining regiment of over 11,000 troops and readied them for attack. But by the time Washington had arrived, it was too late. Clinton had already sent reinforcements. As the Continental Army pushed back against the British forces with volley after volley of cannon fire, the British troops began to retreat further into the woodlands, at which point all fighting had ceased. It was approximately 5:30 in the evening. The Continental troops regathered after the battle and planned for another attack. The following day, however, Clinton's rear guard of Dragoons and Rangers had silently withdrew during the dead of night. In the end, of the 14,300 Continental Army soldiers, 370 suffered casualties. The British Army of 17,600 men sustained 358 casualties. However, there was some debate as to how many soldiers actually died of exhaustion, dehydration, and heat-related causes. 6 days after the Battle of Monmouth, on July 4, 1778, Major General Charles Lee was tried and found guilty of disobeying orders, unnecessary, disorderly, and shameful retreat, and disrespecting the commander-in-chief. He was court-martialed and sentenced with a 1-year suspension from the Army. Although there was no clear winner of the battle, many historians had stated that this battle had no real significance and provided no strategic value. But what it did for the morale of the Continental troops and their faith in George Washington was priceless. It was the Battle of Monmouth that cemented Washington's legacy as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Forces. It also laid the groundwork for his mythical rise as the first elected President of the United States of America.